Have you ever wondered why the kinder you are, the more exhausted you feel? Society teaches us, help others. It's the right thing to do. But Alan Watts poses a question that sends chills down the spine. What happens when your kindness interferes with the lesson life is trying to teach someone? We think we are saving others, yet sometimes we are robbing them of their chance to grow. Not everyone deserves the energy you give. Some people only wish to be rescued, not to change. Some souls have chosen suffering as their path to awakening, and every intervention only pulls them further from that sacred journey. This video opens a new perspective on compassion, where love is no longer about sacrifice, but about wisdom, knowing when to stop. Let's explore the 7 types of people Alan Watts said you should never try to help if you don't want to be trapped in a cycle of pain and self-loss. From childhood, we were taught that helping others is always right. The teaching sank deep into our blood, becoming a moral standard beyond question. Yet Alan Watts, a man who saw life through the eyes of a monk and the soul of a philosopher, asked a question so simple, yet so unsettling. What if your kindness is destroying the very lesson life is trying to teach another? That question rings like a bell, awakening us from the illusion of goodness. Because not every act of help is love, and not everyone needs to be saved. When we rush to pull someone out of their pain, we might be interrupting the very journey that was meant to shape them. Life, as Alan Watts saw it, is a perfect play, where every soul is given its role to perform. If we interfere with the script, we rob others of the experience only they were meant to understand. Society makes us believe that kindness means always saying yes, always giving, always sacrificing. But true kindness is not measured by how much we give. It is measured by whether we know when to give and when to stop. Helping isn't always light. Sometimes it's the invisible chain that keeps another in darkness. The person you save today may become dependent on your pity tomorrow. Alan Watts reminds us that genuine compassion isn't about rescuing someone from pain. It's about allowing them to learn through that pain. Because only in suffering do we truly see ourselves. Think of the times you have fallen apart. Those moments were not endings, but awakenings. So why would we deny others the same opportunity? Perhaps the hardest lesson is not in helping, but in learning to let go. Because wise love knows that everyone must walk through their own night to find their inner dawn. And when you are wise enough to quietly watch someone wrestle with their lesson, that is not coldness. That is the deepest respect for the evolution of a soul. When we begin to realize that not every act of help brings light, we touch a harsher truth. Sometimes our very kindness becomes the chain that binds us both. Not everyone deserves your energy. There are those who, the more they're helped, the weaker they become. They don't seek to walk, they seek to cling. They don't need your hand, they need an excuse to keep avoiding their own life. And you, the compassionate one, slowly get pulled into their spiral, where kindness turns into burden. Alan Watts once said, "If you pull a butterfly out of its cocoon, you kill it, because its wings only grow strong through the struggle of emerging." In the same way, when you rescue someone from their pain, you steal their chance to become strong. Helping the wrong person doesn't just weaken them. It makes you forget the boundary between love and self-destruction. There are people who will drain your energy, not because they are bad, but because they're not yet ready to take responsibility for themselves. They live off the feeling of being pitied, and you become the fuel that sustains their stagnation. You call it sacrifice, they call it entitlement. And the greatest tragedy isn't that they exploit you, it's that you help them escape their own lesson. Alan Watts saw life as a natural flow. Every soul must face its own hardship to awaken. When we prevent someone from experiencing necessary pain, we go against the law of evolution itself. Helping someone who isn't ready is like forcing a seed to sprout before spring. The result is destruction. Therefore, Sometimes true love is knowing when to stand still, when to let others fall, when to watch them stumble without rushing to save them. That is not cruelty. It is faith in their inner strength. Alan Watts never taught us to stop helping. He taught us to help with wisdom, not with fear of seeming unkind. Remember this: kindness is not measured by how many people you save, but by how much of yourself you can preserve among the souls still searching for something to cling to. Help the right person, and you plant a seed of light. Help the wrong one, and you become part of the darkness they create. And on the path to awakening, the hardest thing of all is sometimes simply daring to say, enough. And when we finally understand that not everyone deserves our energy, we begin to see more clearly the essence of those whom Alan Watts called souls not yet ready to awaken. Among them exists a group that most easily ensnares our kindness, the chronically lazy, those who are not truly helpless, merely surrendered to idleness. Type 1. The chronically lazy. They are not lacking in ability, only in will. They know exactly what must be done to change, yet they choose temporary comfort over lasting transformation. They speak of dreams but fear the first step. They lament their fate, yet never take responsibility for it. And when we reach out to help them, they do not show gratitude, they lean. They let us carry the weight of the effort they've long abandoned. Alan Watts once emphasized that in nature, everything operates under the law of self-balance. A branch that bears no fruit is pruned, not out of cruelty, but out of wisdom. The universe does not reward laziness, for life itself belongs only to that which still strives to grow. Yet humans often forget this truth. We fear others' suffering, fear their failure, so we shield them, lift them, do their part for them. And in doing so, we nourish their weakness. Helping the lazy is not compassion, it is our refusal to face our own guilt. We cannot bear to watch others fall, so we rush in, not because they truly need it, but because we need to feel that we are doing the right thing. But as Alan Watts would ask, right for whom? For them? Or for your own comfort in feeling righteous? Sometimes hunger itself is the catalyst for change. If we keep bringing food to those who refuse to hunt, they will never learn how to survive. If we keep lifting them, they will never know the strength of standing. There are lessons that can only be understood when we are forced to face the consequences of our own inaction. And the lazy awaken only when they have nowhere left to hide. Alan Watts never urged us to become cold, he urged us to awaken. Help those who are trying, even if they stumble. But do not carry those who have chosen to stand still. Because when you rescue someone who refuses to walk, you do not just carry their weight, you slow your own journey. So sometimes, true kindness is not in reaching out, but in letting go, allowing others to confront the very laziness that imprisons them. Only when they reach the bottom of their stagnation can the light of true desire for life begin to rise. After the lazy, those souls who have shackled themselves in inertia, we encounter another, more dangerous energy, subtler, but far more corrosive. If the lazy merely drain your strength, then the ungrateful and the arrogant wound you at your core. Because they do not just take your energy, they make you doubt the very worth of your kindness. Type 2 and 3, the ungrateful and the arrogant. Alan Watts once said, "If you give expecting recognition, you have not truly given. But if you give endlessly and receive only emptiness, perhaps you are giving to the wrong person." The ungrateful are the most brutal mirrors of that truth. They accept kindness as if it were an entitlement. To them, help is not a gift, it is someone else's obligation. The more they are helped, the more they demand. The more they are loved, the less they respect. They feel no gratitude, no remorse, and the painful part is we keep giving anyway. Why? Because good people often believe, if I am kind enough, they will change. But Alan Watts saw a harsher truth. Gratitude cannot be taught through kindness. It can only be awakened through loss. When you constantly rescue the ungrateful, You give them every reason to despise compassion. They stop seeing it as grace. They see it as fuel to continue their selfishness. And in doing so, you are not helping them evolve. You are feeding their decay. The ungrateful are not merely those who fail to say thank you. They are souls who have lost connection with reality, believing the world owes them something. They live in the illusion that all good things are their birthright, that they deserve without effort. For them, help is not light but shadow, a place to hide from responsibility. Helping them is like pouring love into a bottomless pit, where kindness is drained and never reflected back. If the ungrateful drain your strength, then the arrogant wound you on another level, deeper, subtler, almost invisible. The arrogant do not seek help. They only seek confirmation that they are right. They don't look for companionship, they crave admiration. They wear the mask of confidence, yet inside is a trembling fear of being wrong, weak, or seen through. And so they resist every helping hand, not because they are strong, but because they are terrified of facing their own fragility. Alan Watts called this the fear of the ego. The ego wants to be glorified, not healed. The more you try to show them their mistakes, the higher they build their walls, made of logic, pride, and cold detachment. They will not listen to you, not until they collapse in silence. And strangely enough, sometimes that collapse is the greatest gift the universe can give them. The arrogant cannot be saved by others, only by the lesson of humility. Alan Watts once compared the ego to a balloon. The more you inflate it, the easier it bursts. And only when it bursts can the true self finally breathe. Thus, every effort to save the arrogant before they are ready is futile. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them fall, for only through the fall will they learn to rise by their own strength. What makes these two types, the ungrateful and the arrogant, so dangerous is not their cruelty, but the way they make us question the very nature of love itself. After helping the ungrateful, we feel hollow. After trying to reach the arrogant, we feel powerless. Gradually, we start to wonder, is kindness really worth it? And that, Alan Watts warns, is the moment darkness seeps into the heart of the kind. But he also reminds us, the problem is not with kindness, it is with where we direct it. Not every soil is fertile enough to receive a seed. Some souls are not yet ready to embrace the light, and we must be wise enough to see that. Not out of disdain, but out of respect. Respect for the path they have chosen, even if that path leads into darkness. The universe never wastes energy. Every act of giving holds meaning, if we choose the right place to plant our hearts. Helping the ungrateful is sentencing yourself to disappointment. Trying to save the arrogant is interrupting the lesson they must learn. Sometimes, letting go is the only way to help them recognize the value of what they were once given. And when they finally awaken, they will not remember your advice. They will remember the moment you stopped and allowed them to face themselves. After encountering the ungrateful and the arrogant, we might think no one else could wound kindness more deeply. But Alan Watts revealed that there are still others, people whose presence makes our help not only useless, but dangerous. These are not merely the unfeeling or the proud, they are those who consciously walk against the current of what is right. They are the cruel and the foolish, two kinds of souls whose interference is not compassion, but rebellion against the very law of life's evolution. Type 4 and 5, the cruel and the foolish. Alan Watts once said, "If you help the one who destroys others, you are not kind. You are merely afraid to face the cruelty of life." That statement cuts through the illusion of blind compassion like a blade. Because some people do not fall into darkness by accident. They choose to remain there. The cruel are not confused. They act with intention. They know the consequences, and they do not care. They exploit kindness, twist empathy, and use compassion as a tool to manipulate. To them, another's mercy is an opportunity to harm without consequence. When you reach out to save them, they take your hand, not to climb up, but to pull you down. Helping the cruel is not benevolence, it is complicity with darkness. Because every time you excuse, forgive, or justify their cruelty, you become an accomplice to suffering. Alan Watts reminded us, the universe has its own order. Darkness dissolves only when it is exposed to light. If we use compassion to conceal evil, we betray the very wisdom that true kindness requires. Sometimes, real love is not unconditional forgiveness, but clear boundaries. When you say no to cruelty, you are not being harsh. You are protecting your own light and giving them the space to face the shadow they have created. Only in the silence of isolation can they finally see what they've become. If the cruel are those who consciously sow darkness, then the foolish are those who unconsciously sustain it. The foolish are not without intellect. They simply refuse to use it. They repeat their mistakes not because they don't know better, but because they don't want to know better. They fear change, responsibility, and the reflection of truth within themselves. And tragically, there is always a savior nearby, someone too kind, too loving, too afraid to watch them suffer. Alan Watts once said, "Some souls only learn through pain because they refuse to listen to truth." That is the law of cause and effect, where only consequences can awaken those asleep in ignorance. If we constantly interfere, constantly rescue them from the results of their own actions, we break the sacred order of the universe. When you save a fool from the mistakes they stubbornly repeat, you take away their chance to grow. They will not change, for they have never paid the price. They will keep failing and dragging their savior down with them. They will make you believe that they need you, when in truth they only need someone to suffer in their place. Alan Watts taught that all suffering has meaning, not as punishment, but as revelation. If a person refuses to see the lesson hidden within pain, then no one can learn it for them. And our interference only delays that lesson, prolonging the suffering for both. Both the cruel and the foolish teach us the same truth. Kindness must walk hand in hand with wisdom, or it becomes a chain that binds. Not everyone deserves salvation, for salvation is a gift reserved for those who are ready to change. Help the cruel and you sow darkness. Help the foolish and you sow illusion. And in both cases, the one who suffers most is you, the heart that has not yet learned where to place its compassion. Remember this. Light cannot illuminate those who keep their eyes closed on purpose. And sometimes, the most compassionate act is to step back, to let them face the darkness they have created. Not because we are cold, but because we understand. Only when they hit rock bottom will they find the reason to rise. Only when there is no one left to rescue them will they discover their own strength. Alan Watts never asked us to reject kindness. He only reminded us that kindness without wisdom becomes a fire that consumes itself. And sometimes, true love is not in helping, but in allowing others to face the consequences of their own karma, for only then can they begin their journey toward awakening. After realizing that some cannot be saved, because they cling to darkness or dwell in foolishness, we step into a subtler territory of the human soul, where darkness is no longer raw and violent, but wears a smile and speaks in sweetness. Alan Watts called them the manipulators and the rebels, those who make you believe they need you, when in truth they only crave power, attention, or control. Type 6 and 7. The manipulator and the rebel. In a world where kindness is seen as virtue, the manipulator is the master of turning your goodness into their weapon. They do not beg, they do not plead, they tell stories. Stories woven with tears, wounds, and memories that make you feel guilty if you dare to walk away. They do not steal, they make you offer. Alan Watts once said, "True wisdom is not about distinguishing right from wrong, but about recognizing what is manipulating your mind." The manipulator knows this better than anyone. They do not target your reason, they strike your heart. They make you believe that if you don't help them, you are cruel, heartless, or unkind. They create a moral illusion, a theater of guilt where you feel responsible for their happiness, as if their peace depends on your compassion. But the truth is, they don't need you to be saved. They need you to keep their performance alive. And when you stop helping, they change roles, from victim to judge. You become the villain, the betrayer, the one without a heart. Then they leave, to find a new audience for their next act of pity. The manipulator is an artist in the realm of emotion. They paint tragedy to control your empathy. But Alan Watts reminds us, love is not meant to be controlled. It is meant to be given with clarity. If you help out of fear that they'll be sad, angry, or hurt, then that is no longer kindness. It is submission. And submission, even when wrapped in compassion, is still a form of slavery. To escape the manipulator's grasp, you must learn to endure the weight of false guilt. Because they will make you believe you are wrong for protecting yourself. Yet Alan Watts teaches, no one truly loves you if their love exists only when you serve them. A letting go of the manipulator is not cruelty, it is awakening. For only when you withdraw your energy do they finally confront the emptiness within themselves. And if the manipulator is the master of emotional control, then the rebel is the one who defies every law of life itself. They know what is right, but they choose what is wrong. They are not without intelligence, only without humility. They rebel not for freedom, but to prove they are different. And in doing so, they sever their own path to the light. The rebel sees boundaries, but calls them chains. They know the consequences, yet treat them like a game. They live in the illusion that defying universal law is a form of strength, when in truth, it is merely the fear of being bound by truth itself. And when you try to help them, they smile, they nod, but they never change. Alan Watts once said, no one can awaken a person who is pretending to be asleep. That is the rebel. You may see their potential, their light, even their goodness, but they will only change when they decide to. Every effort to pull them toward the light is futile, because their learning can only come through their own collapse. You may love them, care for them, even sacrifice yourself for them, but you cannot grow on their behalf. And Alan Watts would tell you, if someone wishes to fall, let them. Only when they touch the ground will they understand the value of standing up. Helping a rebel too soon is to disrupt the lesson that life itself has arranged. They must taste loss, consequence, and solitude to realize that freedom is not the absence of limits, but the mastery of oneself. Thus, both the manipulator and the rebel serve as the final reminders in the chain of souls Alan Watts warned us about. Both drag you into emotional games, one through tears, the other through flames. But whichever form they take, both teach you the same lesson about the boundaries of compassion, that love is not rushing in to save, but knowing when to walk away. Alan Watts once concluded, not everyone is ready for the light. And not everyone you love needs to be saved. Some souls can awaken only when they walk through their own darkness. And the final lesson, awakening and letting go. After journeying through these 7 types of people Alan Watts advised us not to help, we arrive at a profound truth. The problem never lies in those being helped, but in how we help. When we help out of fear, guilt, or the desire to be seen as good, kindness turns into burden. When we help with wisdom, kindness becomes light. And in that intersection, between compassion and clarity, Alan Watts leads us to the final teaching, awakening and release. Alan Watts never told us to stop helping. He only taught that to help without understanding the nature of suffering is to stand in the way of the soul's growth. We are born with the instinct to save others, yet we rarely realize that sometimes suffering itself is the greatest teacher. As Alan Watts said, true compassion is not saving someone from their suffering. It is allowing them to learn through it. That statement reveals a truth few dare to face. Not all pain needs to be healed immediately. Some wounds must be lived through so that the person may discover the hidden strength within. If we rush to heal a soul not yet ready for its lesson, we only prolong its weakness. Helping those who are trying, that is wise kindness. Helping those who only wish to be rescued, that is misguided interference. Alan Watts saw that the world is not lacking in people who need help, but in people who know where to give it. Every time you help someone, you give away a piece of your life force, a fragment of your time, a portion of yourself. If the receiver is not ready to transform, that energy is drained, and you are left with emptiness. That is not love, it is self-erasure. Letting go is not abandonment. Letting go is not abandonment. Letting go is the act of one who understands that every soul must walk its own path to awakening. You cannot force a flower to bloom early, nor can you pull someone out of the dark if they still refuse to see the light. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to leave at the right moment. Alan Watts taught, "When you understand that life unfolds perfectly, you no longer feel the need to fix anyone." Awakening, then, is realizing that everyone is learning their own lesson, and we are not meant to interfere with life's divine choreography. So help with clarity, not pity. Give freely, but never lose yourself in the act. And above all, remember this: sometimes, true love is not in holding on, but in having the courage to let go.